Hi, everyone. Always a joy to connect with my friends. You're a great church in your own right. You guys are amazing, and you've got a reputation for being tremendous, very active ADRA lovers, ADRA workers, and you've done heaps of great things for us. I remember the early days when I was first appointed in Greater Sydney. At that stage, there used to be heaps of you guys that would go out with buckets at the traffic lights and collect lots and lots of money. And while it was a very awesome thing, because you guys were topping the Greater Sydney churches with the amount of money you'd pull in, still it was not highly illegal. and we had to say, please don't do it. We get in terrible trouble. But oh man, we love you guys. You're just awesome. And you've kept up the momentum, even though you've missed out on that fun and dangerous thing to do at the traffic lights. So we love you all, and it's great to catch up with you guys. I want to tell you a story. An amazing story came from the ADRA Cafe at Parramatta. So one of the guys who leads out in the cafe, and he's been doing it for years now, his name's John. John Hoffman. He doesn't mind me using his real name. And so we were given access to a Uniting Church commercial kitchen right down in the CBD of Parramatta. And we had use of this kitchen for quite some time. It was a wonderful thing. And one of the friendships that developed between John and one of the regular people who'd come along for hot food on a Saturday night was a guy we'll call Bob. Now, Bob, he was living on the streets, and it was a pretty tough time for Bob, but he seemed like a pretty bright, intelligent sort of guy. And a lot of the other people who came along to the food pantry, they picked up on this, and most of these people living on the streets, they still have a mobile phone. And John had one, Bob had one, and all these people who came along to the food pantry, they tend to have them as well. So you'd see Bob sitting around a table, having something to eat, hot food from the mostly Parramatta church. There was a couple of groups from there, but some other churches kicked in, and they were on a roster every fortnight doing this sort of hot food, and they'd feed up to 20 to 35 people there on a Saturday night. So because Bob was pretty techie, he would be helping all these other people figuring out stuff on their mobile phones while they were talking. And John's a bit of an evangelist, John Hoffman, and he was pretty keen to kind of pray with these guys, find out what was happening in their lives and build some trust and relationships. So he was always circulate around the tables, sit with the guys for a while they were eating, and hear their stories. And slowly they started opening up to him. But when he wanted to talk about God or pray with these guys, some of the guys pushed back a bit. So he sort of compromised. He said, how about I just say grace with you guys when the food's served and it's time to eat? And so they said, okay, that sounds like a fair thing. We'll do that. So that became the flagship warning, like the alert that now it's okay to eat. You can eat now because the food's arrived. We've said grace, go for it. And so it was a regular thing on Saturday night. John started also occasionally dropping the odd Bible verse into it, and then he would sort of explain. And there was quite a few people who were actually quite interested in hearing what John had to say. And most of the people didn't do a lot of talking. And it took ages to get some of them to share some of their stories. Some were more open than others, but most were pretty silent about their lives. Some of these people just lived sort of couch surfing. Others were sleeping on the streets, pretty rough. And so gradually there was a relationships and trust built there. Now, Bob applied for a New South Wales housing property. And after what seemed ages, probably 2 or 3 years, he was granted a property. And so he moved in, and he had problems with his blinds. He couldn't get the blinds working. So while he was pretty techie, he wasn't so practical. And so he told, John was sort of saying, well, you know, what's happening? What's it like to have a new place to move into? He said, well, it's okay, but the blinds won't work. I can't get them to go up and down and so on. And so John said, all right, I'll come over and we'll see if we can sort this problem out for you. And which he did. So he went over there, and it didn't take John too long. He was quite clever at things like that. And so that was all sorted. And so the relationship continued. Now, last year with COVID, there was a bit of a problem because previously people would sit in a big group around tables and they would eat together. And a lot of them, they would sit in cultural groups or groups because they knew each other off the street a bit. There was one group of people who didn't speak much English. They were sort of Indo-Chinese. They'd all tend to sit together. And so we thought, what are we going to do? So then we started preparing the meals up at Parramatta at the church, and then bringing the pre-prepared packages and then giving out still hot food, but it was in little bags. And so when the people would come, we'd give them the bags and tell them they had to go off to the park nearby, and then they would have a chance to eat on their own without getting too close to other people and stuff. The police came along one night and said, what are you guys doing? And we told them what we're doing and how we were trying to compromise and do the right thing and everything. They said, yeah, okay, go ahead. No problem there. So they were very happy with that. And then there was a problem with the actual commercial kitchen of the Uniting Church. And for some reason, we weren't able to continue working there. There was no breakdown in the relationship. It's just that it was no longer going to be available for us. And so we kind of relocated to the Parramatta Church. And up until then, the relationship with Bob and John grew, and Bob used to still come along, even though he had now a place to live in. He still enjoyed coming along, catching up with everybody. And so things were a bit quiet over the last probably 6 months or so. And earlier this year, there was a phone call from the hospital, and John picked up the phone, sort of said, well, hello, and heard this voice saying, yes, I can hear you. And then, is this John Hoffman? Yes, the voice said. I'm Mary Taylor, and I'm calling from the emergency department at Westmead Hospital. Do you know anyone by the name of Bob Hayward? Said John. Bob Hayward? The name isn't very familiar. Well, he says he knows you, that you used to provide hot meals for him down in Parramatta. Ah, Bob Hayward. Ah, so that's his surname. Yes, I do know him. Well, he's about to be admitted and he's very ill. He wants you to come in and see him. So immediately, John dropped what he was doing and he drove over to the hospital, and sure enough, he found Bob in the emergency ward about to be admitted. So he spent about an hour or so with him, and as he transitioned up to the ward. And so then John used to come in quite regularly over the next fortnight, and he'd always offered to pray. And Bob really appreciated the prayers they had together. So it was a kind of a special relationship. But when they would meet, and usually John would stay for about a full hour, and mostly it was just sitting there and just being in each other's company, not a lot of talking. But Bob did say that he had a couple of daughters one night. So it was sort of gradually opening up a bit. But John could see that Bob was in trouble. He was going downhill. He was very frail. And then after about a fortnight or so, there was a phone call again from the hospital social worker to John. And they said, well, unfortunately, Bob has passed away. And so he had your number here and he wanted us to let you know that. So then John, that was the end of a story, or so John thought. Well, 2 or 3 days later, there was another phone call to John. This time it was from one of the relatives of Bob. And they said, you've been a close friend of Bob for quite some time, and he's given your information, and we would like to invite you to a wake. And so John got pen and paper and he started to write down, and he wrote down the address, and then he said, well, where will it be held at this address? And they said, well, it's going to be held at the Balmain Yacht Club. And I'm not sure if anyone from Wetherill Park is a member of the Balmain Yacht Club, but it's a pretty exclusive society sort of club in a pretty well-heeled area of Sydney. And so John agreed. He said, look, I'm happy to come along and to honour Bob. And yes, we've had a good friendship for several years, like about 4 or 5 years by this time. And so John went along to the wake and met quite a few of the families, and they were very well-educated people of noble heritage, background, ancestry, whatever. And he met around, and lots of people were from the yacht club there as well. And they sort of explained a little bit of Bob's background to John, and he said, well, you know, he used to be a pretty well-to-do fellow, but he sort of dropped off the social scene and decided to kind of disappear. And so that's what had happened. And so Bob, you know, started then to withdraw and socially and live on the streets and just live a very quiet life, and didn't have very much contact anymore with the family. But this story just goes to emphasize, you know, when God brings somebody into your life, you really never know who they are. You know, it's like God's got something on you, and he knows why he brings them to you. And it's your responsibility and my responsibility just to treat them with kindness and respect, and just to let them unravel it in their own good time. And ADRA is a wonderful way of getting close to people's souls and sharing and doing something wonderful that can happen in God's own good time. And we've had a pretty rough time during COVID. There was no ADRA appeal last year, and again we were in trouble again, and we just dreaded closing doors and shutting down programs last year. But it's just amazing how God has blessed us during this rough time, blessed us with volunteers, with finances, and with food, because there's been quite an increased demand. We've had to give out mobile phones to a lot of our counsellors and caseworkers, and so they've been working from home, helping people. And there's been a little bit of home delivery of food as well for people who found it difficult to get in because of COVID. So we've had to change and flex our muscles a lot, but we've maintained the services, and it's been great. God has blessed us. And although our income from the ADRA appeal in Greater Sydney dropped 32% last year, and you know, the church community have really kicked in a lot because they weren't able to bring in money from the streets. But listen to this, across the other conferences in Australia, the average drop in income from the appeal was 59%. So they got a much harder hit than us. And I just put it down to the goodwill of people like yourselves, and God blessed. And so we didn't have to close any of our doors. We've maintained the services, and God has been good. So from the bottom of my heart today, I just want to say thank you so much. We love you. You're our ADRA champions, and I know you're doing some marvelous things again this year, and we just praise your name. And we praise God for the work you're doing, and we just want to say thank you so much. God bless you all, and take care. Bye-bye.